Hey guys, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel, and today's video is all about some of the most surprising books of 2020 and also some of the most disappointing books of 2020. Now I will just say real quick that I am very sorry if you can hear any humming or droning going on in the background. There are some guys outside and I don't know what they're doing. I think they're doing some work, but they've been here all morning and they're probably going to be here till 5 o'clock. I don't know what it is, but every time I decide I'm going to do some filming, there's somebody outside making noise. So we're just going to go with it. Hopefully it's not too distracting for you. I think they might have stopped. Fingers crossed. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. So I think I'm going to start with the most disappointing books first, and then we can jump into the surprising ones and end the video on a positive note. And there are a few books that I have read this year that haven't lived up to the expectations that I had for them. And I'm really sad because a lot of these books were books that I were super excited to read, books that I'd heard amazing things about. We're going to start with one of my most recent reads. I literally just finished this book the other day and I wanted to include it in this video because I was super disappointed by it. And that book is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Now I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this considering how many people adore this book. When it came out there was so much hype surrounding it. Everybody was giving it 4 stars, 5 stars. They were saying such amazing things about it and it's been on my TBR for so long. So I had very high expectations going into this. It was one of my 5-star predictions for this year as well, and I ended up giving it 3 stars in the end. I didn't particularly enjoy it that much. I didn't hate it. There were some aspects of it that I did like, but overall it just fell really flat for me. And I will talk about this book a little bit more in my December wrap up next month, but I just wanted to talk about it now because I'm so annoyed that it wasn't what people said it was to me. Anyway, it didn't have the creepy vibe that people said it had. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel, you know, claustrophobic or anything like that. I just felt really meh about it. It's the best way to describe it. And it's all about this nanny. She gets a job looking after these kids in this big fancy house. Imagine Turn of the Screw. That's what this book is a homage to. Turn of the Key. Turn of the Screw. Like, I don't know how I didn't notice that at first, but then I did some Googling and it is a homage to Turn of the Screw. So knowing that, I was like, oh, okay, it is going to be quite creepy. But the atmosphere let this book down massively. And if you haven't read this, then I'll try not to spoil it too much for you. But there is an element of technology included in this story, which just really put me off. As soon as things like technology, social media start coming into play, I just switch off because I don't enjoy that in books. It has to be done really well for it to pay off for me, and it just, I didn't like it. I didn't feel it was necessary. I don't know, maybe I've missed the entire point of this story, but I felt really let down by this book, and I predicted the end. As soon as I started reading it, I kind of predicted where it was going to go, and there was one twist in it actually that I didn't see coming, but I didn't feel like it added any relevance to the story. I don't know, it just felt really forced for me. It wasn't the page turner that I thought it was going to be. So sorry about that one, guys, but this one just didn't do it for me and I'm really sad about that. Another one I'm really sad about is The Last Family in England by Matt Haig. I don't ever want to put a Matt Haig book on any of these kind of most disappointing books lists because I really adore Matt Haig. I think he's an incredible writer. The Humans is one of my favourite books in the world, followed by another book that I will talk about in a second. But this one I was so excited for because it's written from the point of view of a dog. We're following this Labrador called Prince, and he's part of a Labrador pact, and their mission in life is to kind of, you know, take care of their family, keep them safe, keep the family together. And it's inspired by Shakespeare's Henry IV. It's kind of a retelling of that in a way. And I was really looking forward to it because I hadn't read a book written from a dog's point of view before. Thought it was going to be quite interesting. Every other book that I've read by Matt Haig I've really enjoyed, so I assumed that I was going to enjoy this one, and unfortunately it just didn't do it for me. I didn't find it as funny, I didn't find it as clever, I didn't find it as entertaining as his other books, and not a lot happened in this story. And I feel, looking back, I feel like I should have DNF'd it because it did take me quite a while to get through this. I read quite a few Matt Haig books in 1 week, and this was the one that took me the longest to read. I just felt quite bored through most of it, but I pushed on because I felt like something at the end was going to happen. And the way this book ended actually really pissed me off. I didn't like the ending at all. It made me really sad. And I just, yeah, I'm sad because I really wanted to like this and it just didn't do it for me. There we go. Next we've got The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, and I got this book for Christmas last year actually, and I was really excited to read it. It had been on my radar for a while, so I was asking my boyfriend to buy it for me, and he did. And I was just super excited for it because, first of all, the cover is gorgeous. I absolutely adore it. And secondly, because it's a vampire novel. And I love YA vampire novels so much. And it's kind of been making a bit of a comeback this year, that genre. Pretty much every YA vampire novel that I've read this year has been a disappointment. And I didn't know kind of what to expect with this one going into it. I kind of went into it quite blindly, but I'd seen on the internet, you know, people saying quite good things about it, so it had high expectations. And it didn't live up to those expectations, unfortunately. So we'll talk about the things that I did like about this book. I loved the setting of the French Quarter in New Orleans. I think that's such a magical setting, especially for a vampire romance novel. It kind of, you know, has that really cool vibe about it that just screams vampires. So that was nice. I did really like the atmosphere in this book actually. Renee Ahdieh did a fantastic job of creating this kind of dark, brooding, mysterious romance. And her male antagonist in this book was so sexy. Oh my gosh, I loved him. So I really liked those aspects of the book. But again, it fell really flat for me towards the end. And the first half of this book was definitely a lot better than the second half. But in the middle, I did find myself just kind of flipping the pages quite quickly to get to the good stuff, which I didn't really get until the very last few pages. I don't know, I just don't feel as into this as other books I've read in the past. And again, it's probably because, you know, I have things like Twilight and the Vampire Academy and the Vampire Diaries stuck in my head so much that they've kind of ruined the rest of the genre for me. I don't know. Comment if you agree with me on that. But yeah, disappointed by this one. But I'm still keeping it because of that gorgeous cover. An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Packanen. I read this in October, and this was a book that I didn't really have any expectations for going into it. I knew that it had very mixed reviews. Some people liked it, some people hated it. So I always knew that it was going to be quite hit and miss for me. But I kind of erred towards feeling like I was gonna really enjoy this one because the concept was so interesting. We're following this woman called Jess, A star for the name, love it, well done. But anyway, we're following this woman called Jess. She lives in New York City. She's a makeup artist, and she's doing a client's makeup one morning, and they happen to mention that they're going off to take part in this questionnaire thing, and they're getting paid like $500 for it or something, but they're not gonna go. So Jessie's like, do you know what, I'll go in her place. So she shows up at this place and she gets sat down at a computer. She gets asked some really personal questions, and it's all about kind of like, you know, your morality and ethics. And there's this Dr. Shields, who's behind all of these questions, and they're kind of mysterious, and Jess gets swept up in Dr. Shields' study, and I thought that that concept sounded really intriguing. And the first half of this book was really good. I was hooked, couldn't put it down, really wanted to know what Dr. Shields was up to. When I found out what she was up to, I was just like, okay, so it's that kind of book. And immediately I just didn't like it that much anymore. And the second half, it went downhill from like 200 pages in. And I still gave this book 3 stars because there were lots of elements that I did enjoy. Like I explained, the concept and the first half of the book was really good, and there were a few twists and turns that I weren't expecting. But the second half let it down, and the actuality behind what Dr. Shields was up to let it down, and it just became your average run-of-the-mill thriller. And I just didn't care for it. And I wish I'd DNF'd it, because towards the end I did find myself just skipping some pages just to get it finished, and I should have just put it down. But you know what, like, whatever, I read it and it was a big disappointment. And yeah, I can see why it has mixed reviews. The last book on the most disappointing list is probably the book that I am the most angry about of them all, and that book is The Silent Patient. I gave this book 3 stars at the time, but looking back, I feel like I want to bump it down to 2, because of all the books that I've read this year, this one angered me the most, to the point that I couldn't read anything for about a week or so after. I was really fucked off with this book. The main reason why I was fucked off was because the way this book was advertised does not represent what this book is actually about. And I remember when this book came out, there was so much hype surrounding it, and people were saying it was creepy, you know, that it would have you reading it under the covers. And I just thought, you know, perfect. A great little horror / thriller, maybe a bit of a ghost story, I don't know. Like, that's the vibes that I got from this. I knew that it was about a woman who had killed her husband and she'd been sent to a mental institution, and it was about this doctor going to see her to try and figure out what actually happened, why she killed her husband. And I thought it was going to, you know, have that kind of creepy psychological element to it that would just make you go, what the hell am I reading? But actually it didn't have any of those things, in my opinion, and it was just so dull and so predictable. And I can't find anything positive to say about this book, other than that the start of it really did have me hooked. You know, I was reading extracts from this woman's diary, and we were getting a little insight into her life, and it was really exciting. I was like, okay, I'm interested. I want to go further and find out what's actually happening. But by the middle, I didn't care. And I pushed through because people kept saying to me, you know, keep going, it gets better. Like, there's a really good twist coming. You won't see it coming and the book will instantly get better. And when that twist came, I was like, oh my God, it's one of those books. And it didn't improve it for me. So I'm sorry, but I didn't like this book that much, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I'm really annoyed because I went into it thinking that I was going to be creeped out, that it was going to be one of those books that I wouldn't be able to read without having the lights on, and in the end it was just boring, predictable, boring, and when it ended I was glad. I'm just going to come out and say it. I was glad when it ended. I just... Ugh. I'm not going to talk about that book ever again because it makes me so angry. But anyway, we're going to move on now to my most surprising books of 2020. And I'm very excited to talk about these because I actually really liked them. So for the first book on my most surprising list, we're going to start with this one, The Arrangement by Robin Hardin. I'm really surprised by this because I've read a few Robin Hardin thrillers before and I didn't like them. I remember reading The Party, and I think that was the one that kind of put me off Robin Hardin because it was just really boring and I didn't care for it at all. But when this one came out, I was quite intrigued by the concept behind it, and it was very similar to something that I was writing way back in January of this year, which we're not going to talk about because it's dead in the water. But this is all about a young woman living in New York who gets herself a sugar daddy, and her sugar daddy ends up dead. And it was a really cool thriller, actually. I really enjoyed it. I was in a bit of a reading slump at the time of reading this, and this book definitely got me out of that for sure. And I gave it 4 stars. I was really impressed considering the last book I read by Robin Hardin, I rated it 2 stars. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. What else can I say? I loved the sugar daddy aspect to it. I really liked the sugar daddy in this, actually. He was called Gabe and he was just so suave, and even though he turned out to be a bit of a dick, I still really liked him. I'm not gonna lie, she wrote him so well. And every time when I was reading this, I pictured Gabe as Mads Mikkelsen for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, Mads Mikkelsen could play him in a film and I would be okay with that. But I can't recommend this thriller highly enough. You know, it was easy to read. It wasn't amazing, but it did have some really cool twists in it that I didn't see coming, and it definitely had me hooked from page 1. I could relate to the young woman as well, actually. I saw myself in her a bit. I recognised the kind of situations that she was in. I've been there myself. I haven't had a sugar daddy, but I could see why she would get a sugar daddy. But yeah, I really liked this one. I might try The Swap next and give that one a go, see if I can get into some more of Robin Hardin's books. I don't know, we'll see, but that's The Arrangement. We've got another thriller, and that is The Crossing Places by Ellie Griffiths. Again, really surprised with this one because I thought it was just going to be your average murder mystery. I wasn't expecting too much for this. I read this for the reading rush back in July, actually, and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. Considering this was just a little book that I found in the charity shop several years ago, spent £2 on it. Wasn't expecting loads, but it was a really good murder mystery, actually. I read it really quickly, and I think the thing that I love most about this book is that it's set in Norfolk. So I'm a Lincolnshire girl. I grew up in Lincolnshire, but I used to spend a bit of time in Norfolk with my family every now and then. We'd go for like days out. It was literally just like an hour's drive away from where I lived. So I know the area, and I haven't really read any books set in that part of the UK before. And Ellie Griffiths did an amazing job of capturing the kind of Norfolk moors and giving them the really brooding and dark atmosphere to them, but also making them sound really beautiful still, making them sound like somewhere you would want to go. So I loved that. I love the archaeology aspect in this book as well. The main character in this book is an archaeologist, and she works at university, and she gets asked by the police to come down and look at these bones that they found, and she specializes in kind of like the Bronze Age and things like that. So I really liked that because I learned a little bit as well, and I love it when books educate me. Yeah, I would recommend this. There weren't that many twists and turns, and the ending was quite predictable, but the writing was probably the best part about this book. And again, the main character was really relatable. I know she's a middle-aged woman, but I could see myself in her. I could relate to some of the things that she was going through. So overall, really, really positive book. And I'm looking forward to reading some more books by Ellie Griffiths in the future, because I know she has quite a backlog of work. Next we have got Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, and I gave this book 5 stars. I didn't mention it in my best books of 2020, and I wish I had, but I totally forgot. But I was really surprised by this because, again, with most of the thrillers that I have read this year, I just assumed that it was going to be your average thriller, you know. I thought it was going to be a 3-star read, pretty much. I was really surprised by the twists and the turns that happened in this book. I loved all of the characters. I loved the writing. I thought it was really good, actually. I really like Lisa Jewell's writing. It's very simplistic, straight to the point, really captivating though. And this was the first book that I'd read by Lisa Jewell. And out of all of the books that I've looked at of Lisa Jewell's online, this was the one that I wasn't that sure about. I loved it. What else can I say, basically? It was so good. I finished it really quickly, and it ended so abruptly, and I was like, I want more. It ended in a way that there could easily be a sequel to this. I know there's probably never going to be, and it works well as a standalone, but if there was a sequel, I would just be like so happy, because it left me with questions that I need answers to. But yeah, I highly recommend this thriller. It was so good. We've got another Matt Haig, and I'm really glad that I've got a Matt Haig book on this list. That is The Dead Fathers Club. So of all the Matt Haig books that I read this year, I wasn't expecting this one to be my favourite. This was the one that I didn't really care for that much, to be honest. So yeah, it was surprising when I got to the end, and I gave it 5 stars. So I did talk about this in my best books of 2020, so I won't go into it too much, but this is about a kid called Philip whose dad dies, and then his dad's ghost shows up and tries to convince Philip to kill his uncle because his dad's saying that his uncle killed him. So much fun. Oh my gosh, I love Philip. He's hilarious, and the way the book's written as well made it so much more enjoyable. I can't rate this book highly enough, and The Humans is my favourite Matt Haig book by a long shot, but this one is definitely up there, joint number 1. Oh my gosh, I just absolutely adore this, and I could talk about it all day, but we're not going to, because this video would be an hour long. And then lastly, we've got Every Heart a Doorway and Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan Maguire. Again, I mentioned this book in my best of 2020 video, and I'm surprised that I liked these, because I've been putting off reading them for quite some time, and I didn't feel like they were books that I was ever going to be interested in or enjoy. I've seen them everywhere on BookTube, on Bookstagram. People really, really rated them, but those people kind of like things that I'm not really that into, so I was very judgmental, for want of a better word. I was assuming that these books weren't for me, but that's because I didn't know at the time they were dark fantasy. And when I found out they were dark fantasy, my whole perception of them changed. And I read the first one in about 3 hours. I read this one in about 24, just because I had other stuff going on. But oh my gosh, I was blown away by these books. And I think the most outstanding thing about these books actually is the way they're written. And they're written like fairy tales. You know, when I was reading them, I felt like I was reading one of those stories that start with "Once upon a time in a magical fairyland," kind of like that, you know. I felt like a kid again when I was reading them. They were written so beautifully, and just the idea behind it, it had a very unique concept, you know, these kids like walking through doorways that takes them into different worlds, and these worlds have different things in them, like fairy kings and rainbow bridges and unicorns and vampires, all sorts, basically really cool stuff. And you know, these worlds are called like high logic and high virtue, and I just, you know, there was so much to unpack in these books, and they're tiny, and these are the first books in the series, so I'm really eager to read the rest of them now that I know what they're about. But I was just blown away. I wasn't expecting them to love them so much, and I did. 5 stars for both. Just absolutely incredible. Can't rate them highly enough. Go and read them if you haven't. I can't believe it took me this long to read them, actually. I can't find anything wrong with these books. I can't find any negatives other than that I wish they were longer. But yeah, loved them. Amazing. I'm gonna shut up now because, like I said, this video could be an hour long. Alright guys, so those were my most disappointing and most surprising books of 2020. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books and whether you agree with me. I would love to hear your opinions. I'm going to wrap this video up here. Thank you so much for watching. I have a cup of tea behind me and it's probably gone cold now because I forgot it was there. So I'm gonna go and drink that, and I will leave you with this. Please leave a cheeky thumbs up if you liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos from me in the future, and I will see you all in another video very soon. Bye guys.